Okay, so following on from the factors of production, sort of big picture, zoom out. The question here is, it's just another way of looking at this process. In other words, are the returns to investment greater than the value of current consumption? Now, the whole point of investing, what investing is deferring consumption that you could be engaged in the present and thereby increasing your consumption in the future. So if you don't end up in again, we might need to talk about present value terms. We're going to have to talk about that before too long. But basically, big picture, are you going to get more in the future than what you give up in the present? If you're not going to get more in the future than you give up in the present, then you're not going to invest. You're simply going to consume. And that means our stock of the factors of production are going to be static. We're not going to see any increase in GDP per capita. Now, if the returns are greater than the value of current consumption, in this day and age, the question becomes, are the returns domestically greater than those abroad? So if the returns are greater than the value of current consumption, but the returns domestically are not greater than the value of current consumption, then what's going to happen is people will invest abroad, and they will get a return on their investment. They will be saving, and it will be increasing the stock of the factors of production, except for it will be increasing the factors of production in other countries and other locations. Both of these situations, again, since factors of production are the proximate causes of growth, in both of these situations there will be no growth. However, there is a hopeful bent. In other words, what we have seen in some places for the last 200 years is when the domestic returns are greater than those that are abroad, and those returns are greater than the value of current consumption. In that case, people are going to invest domestically. This, by the way, is not an argument that we should be messing with these returns. Returns are prices just like anything else. We'll talk about this when we get to the market of loanable funds. Trying to artificially increase or decrease the returns is very similar to putting in place price ceilings or price floors. It's messing with the information that we're receiving and almost certainly is not going to yield higher levels of social coordination. Now, in the short run, you might cause people to invest more domestically, but the question then is it sustainable? So, I'm not making the case that we should have policies that directly stimulate domestic investment. This is more of a large picture schema for what would happen. Okay, so when we have productive domestic investment, that is going to increase the local stock of the factors of production. Now we're going to engage in a little sleight of hand here, and we're going to talk about that increasing the local returns. Turns out it doesn't actually have to increase the local returns as long as it doesn't decrease them. Now that's going to take a little bit of heavy lifting when we get there, because typically we assume diminishing marginal production or diminishing marginal returns. In other words, the first machine yields a lot of impact, but the next one yields positive but less, and so on. So we'll take that up when we get to chapter 7 with the Solow model, talking more specifically, zooming more specifically as to how these factors of production get turned into output. But if you stick with me here, assuming it keeps the local returns constant or even increases them, then that will at least keep the returns greater than the value of current consumption, and probably will keep the domestic returns greater than those abroad. So we end up in one of two positions. We end up down here with no investment or investment abroad. Now, investment abroad is almost certainly better than no investment, because at least our citizens will increase their standard of living and their well-being. But in terms of growth as measured by GDP per capita in a country, this would be what's called a poverty trap. We aren't going to grow because we are neither increasing the factors of production nor increasing the incentive to use them. On the other hand, maybe we're lucky and we end up here. That's been the United States' case for quite a while, with the exception of a couple of periods of downturn, like small recessions and even some large depressions. So big picture, that's what we're kind of looking at here, and hopefully that helps you understand what we're talking about. Now, of course, what determines the returns to investment and the returns to investment domestically versus abroad? The big piece there, the returns are the incentive, and what's going to determine those is, again, largely going to be the institutions. At the extreme, you can think about refugees who are choosing to move as much of their physical capital as they can and moving as much of their human capital as they can, as well as their scientific knowledge, to other countries. So if you think about what's happened in Syria, both because of bombings and war, but also because of people migrating, you've almost certainly seen a decrease in the factors of production in the country. Why? Because of the institutions, because of a lack of political stability, at the extreme being war, because of a lack of an honest government that doesn't give a fig for what the rules are that it should be following, because of a corrupt legal system, because of, well, the property rights in Syria weren't really that bad, but most of the other margins have really gone sideways. So that's a framework for thinking about this. And that concludes our big picture Chapter 8, Institutions, and our big picture causal model of growth.